Rock. Hi everyone, and welcome to this session on harnessing the power of Sumo Logic platform for security ops. We've got a good solid roll up here today, and there's obviously great interest in the topic. Looking at the attendees, it seems to be a pretty good mix of current customers and those who are new to Sumo. So it should be an interesting conversation. The purpose of this session is to explore in an informal conversation how leveraging our cloud native SIEM capabilities provides advantages to our customers, and how the paradigm shift from cloud, especially in these current times, affects how we manage SecOps, DevOps, DevSecOps, and how the SOC environment has changed over time. In fact, a SOC environment that for most of you today would appear very, very different and far more distributed than what it was a couple of years ago. We're fortunate to have panelists here today from a couple of our Australian customer organisations whose market presence is globally beyond dispute. Starting off with Pablo Reyes, who is the Information Security Manager at Leap Dev, one of Australia's foremost software companies, and they've got about 45,000 users worldwide. Along with Pablo, we've got Kyle Jackson, who runs the SecOps team at Octopus Deploy, one of the coolest software and code deployment platforms on the planet, and developed right here in Australia. So we're very proud to have both of those guys with us. In addition to that, we're honoured to have Sumo Logic's own CISO, George Gerchow, who's going to give us a view on how our world has changed in-house since the release of our cloud SIEM capabilities, and certainly give some perspective on the world before that. And some of the background on how the solution plays out at a global scale in the cloud. So, gentlemen, thank you all for joining us. Really appreciate your time, and let's kick this off and turn it into a conversation instead of a presentation. So, Kyle, we're going to start with you. What challenges were you looking to address when you started looking for a SIEM style tool?
Yeah, so we're in a different situation, I suppose, from most companies already had an existing SOC. So we were essentially building out a security functionality at the time. So we were looking for a system where we had a lot of disparate information in all these different systems, and we're trying to find a way that we could essentially take that data in, get the information out that we wanted, and that was refined enough that we weren't just essentially flooding everyone with logs and events and alerts and all these problems while we're essentially building out our security function as the team itself. So we kind of, I don't want to say we built the team around the platform, but we kind of built the platform with the team as we grew. So to make it a little bit simpler. We were also essentially, as we were increasing that security maturity and building that team, we were very cautious about, let's not overwork our people, and let's not, sort of fall in those pitfalls that, a lot of SOCs do fall into, where it's just endless noise. So yeah, very cautious about that as well.
And that's definitely my experience in the past. It's probably not all that difficult to build a platform, but it's really hard to keep people when you burn them in the first 5 seconds. So yeah, really good point.
Exactly.
Pablo, similar story for you or slightly different?
I think it was similar in a way that we have a small team, and we need to attend to a lot of different events from different sources. So I guess one of our main challenges was threat detection and security alerting. So having sources from different, I would say, completely disparate platforms running on different locales, it was one of our main challenges. So yeah, we are I guess aligning our processes, putting Sumo SIEM in the middle, and so far it's been very good.
And when you talk about different platforms or different tools, it's really just consolidating that, so you've got a single view of it all as much as possible.
Oh, that's important one. Yes. So we have info coming from endpoint protection systems, from networking devices, from other monitoring solutions, and putting them all together, aligned, normalized, and putting in a format that we can actually search and investigate. I think it's great.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, mate. And George, I suppose from Sumo's platform perspective, we would have been putting a lot of stuff together in the past, and this would have been something of a godsend for us in terms of getting our global operations under control.
It really was. And let me just start off by saying this, a disclaimer. Like people always, when they talk to me, they're like, oh, you can collect whatever logs you want at no cost because you work for a SIEM logging company. We pay AWS margins. So we also have to be careful and have a lot of stewardship over what data we collect.
Yeah.
And so it was. I mean, Paul, before Cloud Siem Enterprise, we were building a lot of subqueries, deep subqueries to go after exactly what Pablo was saying, take disparate data sources and try to bring those together. And it created some noise, for sure. A lot of actionable stuff. But once we got Cloud Siem Enterprise, we were able to cut through a lot of that noise, get right to the signal. The other thing I'll say too is, because I really like what Kyle said about kind of starting with a platform and starting off slow, smaller team, we did the same. The first thing that we did was we focused on AWS logs, VPC flow logs, CloudTrail, eventually GuardDuty, but then started more on the access management side with SSO, MFA, VPN logs, and trying to start building a unique picture of threat hunting and attacks that were a possibility that we'd search for, very much like Pablo said as well.
Yeah, so sort of, I know, from personal experience, it was very much a needle in a needle stack kind of situation. And to your point, George, getting some sense to all of that data is possibly the most important thing. It's narrowing that down into something that's a little bit more actionable than what we would have had in the past, and certainly what most organizations have had. So looking at that, Kyle, what was the potential impact on your business with those challenges? If you continue to do the same thing previously, what was the payoff there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose the problem we had is that we're a remote first company sort of before COVID kicked off. So everything was cloud. We were cloud native from the very beginning. So we have probably every cloud platform under the sun in the environment at the moment, all essentially spitting out information. Prior to having any sort of centralized detection, alerting functionality, we're essentially relying on specific individual cloud platforms to provide that information. And obviously you can see, like if you're in AWS, GCP, Azure, you're in 3 different platforms already just to sort of understand, well, what's happening here, what's happening there. So if that kept going, and as we grow as a company, that was going to be quite a disastrous outcome, as it's just unmanageable really at the end. So it was really key for us to sort of get a hold of that information and bring it to one system, one pane of glass, so to speak, and then make that a little bit simpler for us. What also sort of benefited us in that process was, as we were growing the team, obviously CSE had that sort of pre-built-in rule set component. So we didn't have to worry about engineering detection straight away. We could leverage on, lean on that from the beginning. So
yeah, good point actually. And Pablo, you're probably a more recent user of the Sumo Cloud Siem Enterprise solution. How has that changed your world in terms of the previous impacts versus what's happening today?
Oh, I can tell you, it's been a game changer, and it's been great for us so far. And you're right, we've been using it only for a few months now. The main impact, in my opinion, it's one is visibility, and the other one is time to response. So we on the past we did a lot of manual consolidation and having alerts in our emails or on other systems like Slack, and the time consolidating data, putting it together, and the rotation as well in our internal staff with a little bit of responsibility and experience with certain systems, and then putting them all of these ones together and asking them, oh, when this happened to this, when this other system sent you this alert, do that. It was a little bit of a nightmare. So these days we are just putting all together, and when an incident like this one happened, we all know what to do, where to go, and how to respond to it. So I would say triaging for us, it's been one of the main processes that have been impacted with this. So it's been great so far.
Excellent. Yeah, good to know. I appreciate it. Yeah. So George, pivoting that same question in terms of what the business impact of these challenges were. Pablo's point there around workflow and accountability and responsibility for actions becomes a really important part of our day now as well. How does, firstly, the the impact on our business should we not have addressed those challenges? And secondly, how has it changed the way that we work on a daily basis?
Yeah, so the first one, I'll go off of something that Kyle was saying before, which is just the fatigue, when you're trying to do more with a smaller team, because we just don't want to hire a lot of FTEs and use them inefficiently, like on tickets all day, looking at alerts. So one example I'll give you guys previous was we would always look for what's called a Superman attack, which is two people logging in from different locations. Well, if we didn't have VPN logs mixed into that, plus where the MFA push was happening, we just didn't have enough data. So back to Pablo's point, even like bringing all that together and being able to see it and react to it in a better way and understanding it, even if it turned out to be a false positive, it was worth it because there wasn't a lot of activity like that. And so that's been a real impact to the way to just the FTEs and growing out the team and automating as much as we can before we go back to our friends in finance and HR and ask for more people. The second place is with me establishing KPIs that go up to the board. They want to see how many potential incidents, events, and breaches actually take place on a quarterly basis. I felt like before a lot of my reporting was a little bit all over the place because we were looking into so much, too much. And now what we've really been able to do is narrow scope. That's what we always want to do. From a security and compliance perspective, narrow scope.
That's actually a really interesting point. I'm gonna sort of pick on that a little bit for a second, George. And certainly in my time in cybersecurity, one of the bigger challenges has been to prove what you're doing has been successful. When you go cap in hand to get more budget for cyber, unfortunately, if you've been successful and there's been no events, and if there's been no events, there's no proof of what you're doing has been effective. So has this allowed you and your team to better spell out to the board and to those that are writing the checks that this has become more effective because of the platform that you put in place?
Oh, absolutely. And it's a key metric because we want to see events. Events to us are things that go into a post-mortem that were never a breach, never an incident, nothing that could have been exposed. So the amount of events that we're able to say, look, here's what we looked into, here's what it could have been if we wouldn't have taken action, has really helped a lot of those conversations, helped us a lot with HR and finance, because now they know when we go after something or we really need headcount, we get that. When we really are looking for new pieces of software as part of our security fabric, we usually get that as well too. And the other interesting point too, and I told you a little bit about this last week, is now my team is responsible for IT as well. Yeah. And facilities, and all that plays into that same kind of reporting and metrics.
Yeah, what a fun life you've got.
I'm thrilled.
Better you than me. So Pablo, just jumping back to you, and that's a really interesting point that George has brought up around, looking to get budget or looking to put some reportable framework around what we do in cyber and SecOps. Has that started to play out in your environment, or is it still a little bit early to see that reportability of your functions evolve?
Oh, even that it's been only a few months, I can tell you, based on what we can report now, we can justify maybe tools that we had on hold for a little bit, things that, okay, maybe if we had this other capability, maybe we would be able to do this other stuff. I think it's helping. And the other one is reports for compliance, which are important for one of our business units. So it's easier for us just justify, yes, how we are going with this is a tick, because we have these reports, and here, there you go. It's from a third party. It's not us making them, and I think that's very valuable.
Actually, it's a really good point, and we try to dismiss compliance as much as possible because it's sometimes painful, but having a platform to report on that makes it's such an arduous process. So really valid point about what we do from a compliance perspective and how we make that far more reportable as an independent third party rather than you saying yes, everything's fine. So yeah, good call, mate. Kyle, what about at your end? Similar kind of deal, or is it different given the evolution that Octopus is
No, we've actually just recently started actually leveraging those metrics, going up to obviously my manager and then up to the board. So probably very similar to George's point, is that we're sort of taking the metrics out of that system and then bringing it back up, so there's visibility to the board of the company to say, like, this is what we're seeing, this is what we're actioning, this is what's happening. And that sort of allows them to be across what is happening, because sometimes it's a bit of a, I guess, a black box sometimes, where it's like, what's happening down in cyber, you're like, things, all sorts of stuff. So it has a bit of visibility.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good call. Actually, I'm going to bounce back to you for a second, George, and just ask you a very quick question, because it's something that's sort of present in my mind over my history in this kind of business, is that we don't talk often about how the technology influences the quality of the SOC analyst's life. We've sort of spoken here about, you know, how what we're doing is relieving compliance pain, is making it far more meaningful, is giving them a little bit more of or a lot more of an insight into specific causes and less noise. Have you seen an impact? This is a bit of a loaded question, but have you seen an impact in just generally how those FTEs are, you know, living their life and getting value out of a platform like this?
Yeah, they're happy because they're not responding to getting flooded with alerts. I mean, it's as simple as that. From an analyst perspective, like our analysts that sit in Poland with our SREs, we consider, by the way, SREs to be an extension of our team. I mean, they're just great security people, man. You know, and I'm sure Kyle and Pablo would agree with that. I mean, they just really are. So getting them on side and then not disrupting them a lot with looking at alerts or events that lead to absolutely nothing has really helped their quality of work life, which is very important to me. You want happy people inside and outside of work. A couple other things I want to mention too. Pablo had mentioned Slack earlier as being a great data source. We were able to prove through CSC that we needed to buy Slack Grid Enterprise just because of a lot of the stuff that we were finding in Slack. And I'm sure both these guys completely agree with that. And finance was like, that's a no-brainer once they saw some of the evidence that we had come through, which is really good, because eventually what happens is, as companies grow and you start moving more into a public-facing company, people want to bring in e-discovery tools and all kinds of stuff to be able to dig into Slack. It's like, no, let's start slow. Slack Grid Enterprise is a great place to go, and then we build on from there. Last thing I'll mention too, off of what Pablo said, were QARs, quarterly access reviews, using something like Sumo Cloud Siem Enterprise. So valuable to automate that on the SOC and then present that back to the compliance team on a quarterly basis to cover that compliance checkbox is key. Yeah, very good call. And to that end, Pablo, I'll start with you. We've spoken about, you know, workload, but are you able to measure the productivity of those analysts and of your SOC team in a better way now than what possibly you may have had to do before?
I think yes. Look, something that we streamline our process, and what we are doing these days, it's we are creating tickets based on certain events that fill in certain criteria, and I can tell you, we can see clearly as a metric the number of tickets that we have of certain type and how we are responding to them and how fast we are responding. Yeah. So that was a key metric for us. And yeah, I can tell you, it's very easy to identify who's closing tickets of certain, I would say, priority on time, and who's maybe is missing or delaying it a little bit. And we can identify why we are taking more time closing these ones down with certain analysis more than the other ones. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's not just about measuring productivity for the sake of saying this person's more productive or this process is quicker, but rather trying to evolve those processes over time and make them more efficient, make them more effective. Kyle, same deal in Octopus. Are you able to now better measure that productivity and get a better view on what the workload is for those analysts?
Yeah, we are. And it's really mean time to sort of response is or remediation is our marker there. And actually in the last 2 weeks, we noticed obviously when the mean time to sort of resolution starts to blow out a lot, you start to wonder, like, what are these insights being generated? And you look at it and go, well, that's just noise. So it helps to identify that noise very quickly, remove that, and then you're back to sort of where you should be baseline. And so it allows us to keep people happy, make sure that we're responding correctly, and keep that nice balance.
Yeah, and balance is probably the operative word in this whole situation. Very hard to find. So taking a step back, and again, you guys are on different parts of the journey, so it'd be interesting to understand the time frame from the point where you decided, we need to put this platform, or we need to put a platform into place. So let's do a proof of value or a proof of concept. From that point to going to production, was it a relatively long process? Was it short? What was the sort of time frame? We'll start with you, Kyle, while you've got the mic.
Yeah, that's right. Ours was about 4 weeks, I think. So we had already gone in on the core platform, and we were loving it. And we were like, look, we knew we wanted a Siem at some point, and we knew CSE was there. So we're like, look, let's get a POV in, let's make it happen. With a bit of help from professional services team, that was up and running in about 4 to 5 weeks in the end. And yeah,
it's good to hear. Pablo, how about in the case of Leap? Was it a similar kind of time frame, or?
Very similar.
Right.
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, very similar to what Kyle said. It was weeks. Yeah, possibly same time frame. We already had Sumo, so we were using Sumo for a few years now, the core one, and for us it was sort of simple. For most of our data ingest, we just move it or redirect it to, in this case, to Siem. But we had some other systems which we didn't have a direct integration, or we didn't have the plugin. And something that I can tell you, it was a great experience. The support team was fantastic. We made up a few. We had to fine tune and made some scripts from scratch, and they help us with all of that. So it was definitely very, very, very quick. Weeks, not months. Seriously, it was weeks to see the value and to see the results.
That's awesome, especially given that you had to construct some custom scripting to get certain sources in, and actually your situations are different to some in that you were already a Sumo Logic customer with our continuous intelligence platform. Did you find that there was a lot of crossover between the data that you were already ingesting for DevOps and observability and metrics and all those kinds of things? Did you find that there was a crossover with the data that you wanted to pull into the Cloud Siem anyway, or was it a whole new data set?
It was a good mix. So we reused a few sources, but yeah, I would say some of the sources that we already have, we missed a lot of things, to be honest. So we didn't have the capability of analysis. So we had the data there, but we didn't do anything about it. And I would say it was a very interesting mix. So yeah, new data and the data that we already had. Yeah,
good to know. Good to know. So George, hearing these two guys talk about 4 weeks from the beginning of a POV to production gives me reflux when I think about the amount of time I've burnt in my life getting traditional Siems up and running. Like, we're talking months, and in some cases I've seen customers taking years. How does that, what's your response to that? And did we experience the same thing internally when we started rolling out this platform for our own use?
Yeah, it was very interesting because I love this question because I always like hearing from all of our customers worldwide, and it seems to be a common pattern to where people are up and running. And again, it goes back to something that Kyle said early on. Being cloud native helps, like obviously it collects off of on-premise data as well too, but it's going to accelerate that journey as fast as possible. But when you've already been using the core platform and then all of a sudden you bring this in, it really helps align a lot of different things. And we're finding that the speed to market, the speed to value is that it's weeks, which is really, really cool to hear. Mind blowing.
It is. I still have to take a reset and say he did say weeks.
He said really, weeks. But think about this, like you said before, you'd have to roll out infrastructure, support that infrastructure, lock down that infrastructure, I mean, that alone, we're talking months.
It's 3 months to build the foundation of your Siem, and then you haven't even installed the software at that point. So it's, if ever there's an example of where cloud has had a positive impact, that's a good one. And sort of that brings me to the next question. And we sort of Here at Sumo, we have lived cloud for our entire life, and I know you guys are very much cloud native or cloud first at the very least. When you think about deploying a SOC solution, when you think about deploying a Siem, and we're going to talk specifically about cloud, does the fact that when an incident happens, when good turns to bad, obviously the chatter, the noise, the logs, everything starts to explode. Does that become part of the thought process? How does this particular provider scale with me during a major event? Is that part of the due diligence that happens before you jump on a particular platform? So we'll start with you, Kyle.
Yeah, I would think so, because obviously that can cause a lot of problems, right? If you got a big event going on, you got thousands of events coming in or insights. Having a platform that sort of bogs down middle of that, or maybe can't handle that capacity, is obviously a problem. So having that sort of elasticity or scalability within the platform to say you can just take more data and keep sort of generating, that's great for us. You know, we're not worried about, oh, our array ran out of storage mid-event, we can't store any more data. That's not really a concern for us, obviously, with this cloud platform. So that's probably a big part for us.
Fair enough. And Pablo, similar deal?
Yeah, similar deal. What Kyle said. Yeah. If we have limited capacity during an event, so let's say we just bought a server that it's it has this amount of RAM, and we can't scale, or we are not able to I guess process or do further analysis just because the restrictions on hardware, for example. That's a big deal. So elasticity, on this type of base, with all the cloud offer and cloud services that we have, I think elasticity it's key, definitely.
It is. And George, I'm going to sort of reframe that question a little bit to you, because I mean, we eat, sleep and breathe cloud. So there was never really a question for us as to whether we're going to be cloud or on-premise. But the reframe is really about, cloud doesn't always equal cloud. And to sort of take that a little bit further, if we look about the architecture of Sumo and the way that we are multi-tenant, and we spread the workload across our entire sort of customer platform, can you give an insight as to the differences between the different flavors of cloud, or how somebody might be talking about a cloud solution, but in fact it's just really cloud infrastructure on a single tenant and doesn't scale the same way? Can you give us your view on that and a bit of an understanding?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it really is a scalability and a security issue, actually. And I'll explain it this way. Do you guys remember a few years ago when Meltdown Spectrum happened?
Yep.
So everyone on premise was afraid to patch, and I don't blame them because it was going to break things. But single tenant cloud providers were also afraid to patch because everything was so different. Everything was configured within those tenants so different. Well, for us, we had no choice, right? We had to get it done because it was the first time that something really hit AWS like that, hit us and the other major cloud providers. So we worked with AWS. We watched them pass across our global zones within like 6 hours. And then on top of that, we rolled out a new image of Ubuntu within like another 4 hours. So we were completely done, seamless patching over in like 10 hours. And what an amazing feeling that was. And then all of a sudden I'm on Reddit and I'm reading about some single tenant providers out there that are like, people are asking, legitimate customers like Kyle and Pablo are asking, hey, did you patch your stuff? And the answer was, no, we're going to, maybe. And so whether Meltdown or Spectra did what it was supposed to do, it didn't matter. When you're a cloud provider, you're building trust with your customers and your prospects, and you've got to act. And so we were able to act. And if we weren't multi-tenant, that would have never happened. Standardization is key.
Yeah, we would have had a target on our head without question if we were single tenant. And that brings up a secondary question, and we look at patching and that process. It's possibly one of the most, I've spoken to customers. In fact, I was at a customer in China a number of years ago, and I remember talking to their desktop people, but similar situation. And I asked the guy, how often do you patch? And he sort of danced around the question, because the answer was, we should be doing it daily with the amount of infrastructure that we've got, but I only do it every 6 months because I'm scared. I'm actually scared about rolling that patch out into our organization, because if it goes wrong, then I'm going to be walked out the door. So patching and patching infrastructure, especially security infrastructure, becomes doubly frightening, and it's something that we overlook when we give our solution to a cloud provider such as Sumo Logic, is that they're taking away all of that burden and all of that fear. I hate patches, there's been times when I've actually worked. I can think of one with an Australian bank, and I won't name them, but I remember sitting across the table from the guy that was responsible for keeping everything up to current, or N-1 as it was there, and he literally put his hands over his eyes and hit the enter button. Because we didn't know what was going to happen on that particular patch, but it was such a critical one. When you do that in an organization, especially a mature and well-oiled organization such as one of our top 4 banks, it makes you realize just how much of a lottery sometimes that is, and how important it is to release yourself or mitigate that burden by outsourcing it to somebody else like Sumo Logic. So, yeah, that's a whole new conversation, and we won't go down that rabbit hole. But looking at some of those gaps that we had before, and I'll start with you, Pablo. What sort of gaps, or what glaring gaps were there within your organisation that you think Sumo's Cloud Siem has closed since it's been running in the short time that you guys have been going?
I'd say the most important one is correlation of events and support for analysis. Those I think those were the gaps that we had before. So we were collecting data. That wasn't the issue, but putting it together, normalized, aligned, and easy for us to actually review it and perform analysis and go from not knowing to just a few alerts. I think it was key. It was key. So yeah, definitely correlation for us. It was very important.
And George, I'm going to bounce back to you again. Correlation and context, I think, is possibly one of the most important things about the complexity that is a security operations center at the moment. We often, certainly historically, looked at all of these red flashing lights. We looked at the noise, we looked at our SIEM or our SIM or whatever it may have been light up, and then we tried to bring it all together and used human logic to sort of chunk through that context, or chunk through that, which was never effective. I can tell you, we often pretended that we were doing a great job, but we never were. How important do you think that whole context and correlation part of the process is, and has it sort of played out as much as I think it might have here at Sumo?
Yeah, it really has. I mean, it's made events actionable. Very, very actionable, but then repeatable, to where we can get an analyst out of the way the next time we see something similar up to a certain point. Yeah. Our whole goal at Sumo on the security and compliance team is work yourself out of a job, automate yourself out of a job as fast as you possibly can. And so what we did is we took a layered approach. We started off with the different event types that we wanted, different data types. To Pablo's point, correlation became very important within those data types. Then once we started looking at it holistically, we said, okay, now what can we really, really automate, and then start getting into the world of SOAR? Because I believe what happens is, like, SOAR, once it came out, everyone's like, oh, I got to get there. Yeah. I've got to get there. And it's like, no, you don't. Time, because if you automate the wrong stuff, man, it's over.
Exactly right.
So you got to set the foundation, and it really got us set up with Cloud Siem Enterprise to determine what it was we really wanted to focus on when it came to SOAR. And so it was just a major game changer for us internally.
Actually, that's a really cool point, because I remember, 10, 15 years ago when we were talking about automating security, I was scared out of my wits about what was going to happen next, because there's still human rules. So we're still, we're almost making our failures programmatic if we don't do it correctly. So it's a really valid point. And I think it's important to understand that SOAR, as awesome as it is, as wonderful as it is, we've got to make sure that we point it to the right things. We don't want to just go scattershot on automating everything we can think of, because that's going to put us in a world of hurt as well. Yes, so Kyle, from your perspective, what were the the big gaps or the big rocks that you feel that you've closed or moved since you've been running?
It's exactly the same as Pablo mentioned. Sorry. It was essentially correlation. That was the massive thing that we had. And similar to what George said before is, we were looking at subquery in Zip to essentially do this correlation. And it was just like, I can't deal with this logic. There's going to be an easier way to do this. So that was a big thing for us.
and I suppose that's one of the things, we tended to throw more humans at these problems before, and the logic point that you've just made there, Kyle, is a classic. Often it's machines attacking humans, and we've all seen Terminator. It doesn't work out so good. So we need to leverage machines to crunch through that stuff to give us a much smaller data set to make decisions on and do the analysis on. So yeah, logic is a very important part of this process. So we're coming up to a time where we might move across and start to take some audience questions. So please type your questions in, folks. I can almost guarantee from experience we won't get through all of them. But what you do type in, I promise you, we'll answer and follow up possibly after this call. But we've got a couple coming in already. And this is I'm going to say it's to Kyle and Pablo rather than us, George. But what percentage of your workloads are in the public cloud? So Pablo, we'll start with you.
Oh, I would say it's very high. I would say 80%.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. And is Leap a cloud first or a cloud native organization, or is this something that's taken the transition over time?
Well, no, these days it's completely cloud based now, completely cloud. Yeah, still we have a few services running on-prem, but I'd say 80. No, I think it's more than that. Should be maybe 90%. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a very freeing thought sometimes. Kyle, how about Octopus? I know you guys are very much, almost a cloud native organization.
Yeah.
What's in your place?
We're 100%.
Yeah,
there's no on-premise for us. So yeah, we have an issue sometimes with understanding how much we have in the cloud. So it's actually interesting. CSC does help us with that as well. So we get surprised every once in a while and we go, oh, that's even there. Interesting. All right, we found that.
Yeah, this whole shadow IT thing has just become part of our religion now. So there's no such thing as shadow IT anymore. It's just more cloud. Exactly. So yeah, very interesting. And that actually brings up another sort of question for me. When you start to deploy these systems, do you find that there's a process of discovery more so than when you haven't got it on what you actually do have up there? Do you discover more instances? Do you discover different technologies that you weren't aware of that you now have to cover off in your security ops? Kyle?
Yeah, from our point of view, 100%. So, in one of our AWS, sort of accounts or tenants, there's over 100 VPCs, and as people, we can't quantify that, easily. So when we added these systems in, we're like, hey, there's a thing over there in that region. I didn't even know we had that region. As a very R&D heavy company, you start to find all these wonderful things and you're like, you almost get a little bit scared. You're like, I just want to stop looking. Like, how can I stop this?
Plausible deniability is out the window.
But no, you're 100% correct. So,
Pablo, you'd have the same problem. I mean, we're all sort of developers punching out code. We just do stuff. So, do you have a similar issue? Well, not an issue. Did you discover similar paradigms at Leap?
Oh yeah, I thought this was off. I thought we aborted this system last year. Oh, why this is still running? And in some instances, we had it running, and even we didn't have a valid license. So don't tell anyone. But yeah, it was like, come on. Yes, it was funny. Discovering these kind of things, funny and good at the same time. So we just shut them down for good.
Yeah, and no, we won't tell anybody you didn't have a valid license. There's nobody listening in on this conversation. So George, this is actually a really interesting topic, and you know, you can't measure or you can't secure what you don't know. How important is that? Not just for Sumo, but obviously you're talking to a lot of our customers regularly. How important is that as a topic or a subject for people to understand?
Always, you know, and one of the things, you know, going back to an early thing that Kyle said that I wrote down is transparency. And this is what I love about talking to customers is I believe now more than ever, we're talking about what our issues are. I was just dying laughing at this last conversation because AWS user accounts, for God's sake, stop it.
Yeah.
It's a human or a bot or whatever it may be. Like, oh my gosh, like it's just wrong. But it's more important now than ever because we are moving rapidly. Like, you know, when I first got started in security, it was all about stop, slow down, say no. And it's not, you know, our mentality is get out of the way as fast as possible, make security so seamless that people don't even know we're there. But this discovery of things that either existed, like Pablo said, that you thought got shut down, or just new things coming up is more important now than ever. And I'll tell you why too. And even with other solutions, supply chain is the #1 root canal that I'm getting on a daily basis today.
Yeah.
Who are you using? How's it working? How does it mesh in? How much open source do you have? Is it really secure? I mean, so it is massive. And this problem's not going to go away anytime soon. In fact, it's going to get worse.
Yeah. It is completely nebulous. And and I'm so glad I don't do that for a living anymore. I'm glad you don't do it. So another question that's just come in, and I don't know how clearly we can answer this, but I can see where the question's coming from. The question is, did you find security challenges increased along with cloud adoption? I think that goes back to some of the stuff that we used to think pre-cloud, when you know, cloud was a PowerPoint presentation from some vendor and we were thinking about moving to the cloud. There was a very big fear that once you shipped your data into somebody else's data center, if you like, that security was more difficult or more challenging. Did you, we'll start with you, Pablo, did you find, and certainly not just at Leap, but through your career, have you found that cloud increased security challenges? I'm sure they've been different, but would you say that the challenges have increased?
I think the challenges are the same. The challenges haven't changed. We just changed the model of responsibility. We are just sharing the responsibility with the provider. Yeah. I think that's the key. But I think the challenges and the threats and the risk are the same. We are just approaching them in a different way. And I think just going back to one of your points earlier, just as a good example, very basic practice, which is patching. If someone else is doing patching for you, that just a small thing, it's just like, yes, I don't want to do it. So is that shared model, which it's very, I think it's, I would say personally, I am very, I have an addiction for cloud services. So, and it's because of this management and easy to turn on, easy to turn off, of boarding and onboarding a solution is very easy.
Yeah. And Kyle, again, you guys have been cloud forever, and I know you have for quite some time, but what's your position on that? Do you think cloud provides increased challenges or different challenges or less?
Well, my history has mainly been in cloud, generally from a professional point of view, and I've kind of found that it actually makes it easier to a degree. So if you take the whole traditional thing of, you know, patching virtual machines, right, on premise, it's a very manual process. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. We're in a cloud, well, I'll just destroy them and build new ones. Like that's an easier process for me to do. You know, and the other thing is being like on premise, you have to get budgeting for certain new features and sets, whereas cloud, it's all just on how much you want to pay per hour for this thing, and it's there, it's usable. So kind of makes it a little bit easier, I suppose. The bar of entry is lower, I suppose, into those enterprise feature levels.
Yeah, and I think to the point that you've just made now is it becomes more consumption oriented. So the ability to scale and grow doesn't increase security challenges, whereas, you know, back in the bad old days of building infrastructure and doing a whole bunch of stuff on premise, growing provided bigger challenges, you know, opened up your vector of attack, you know, made you more vulnerable in certain areas, and the complexity made it worse, whereas I think cloud has brought it to some level of singularity, or as much as we possibly can. And George, you know, obviously we love the cloud, we live there. We were given birth by it, but talking to customers that you've spoken to, and certainly in previous aspects of your career, what's your opinion on that? How has that changed things? How, you know, has it made it better? And I certainly believe it does, but would love to get your opinion on that.
Yeah, laser focus. I mean, one, you know, going back to the shared responsibility model that Pablo brought up.
Yeah,
I'm focusing on the applications and the data now. You know, I'm not focusing on that underlying infrastructure anymore. Now, you do have to take some responsibility in understanding the shared responsibility model and what are some of the things that you have to do. Another one too is tagging. You know, tagging was a pipe dream when I was at VMware. And now we're able to tag and segment the way that data flows and workloads operate much easier. Thinking about security. So, you know, I was a firewall guy way back in my day, and we always added on to that firewall, but we never took anything else because it was going to be like Jenga, man. That thing was going to come down. And so now, working with, you know, VPCs and security groups like Kyle had mentioned before, AOBs, and really understanding how to properly route and segment traffic has become much easier. Now, one thing that Kyle said that is true too is the mind-blowingness of when a provider like us releases new features. Before, you'd sit around and wait and have to upgrade the infrastructure. Now you wake up one day and it's still there. Half the time when we talk about roadmaps, we're telling people things that we've already done over the course of the last 6 months because it's there. And to me, that kind of agility, that kind of response to what's happening in the security community is unparalleled unless you're in the cloud.
It's funny you should mention the speed and rapidity of updating and new features and all of that. Some of you guys may not remember, but there was a time in history where we had version numbers for software. That's gone. We don't talk about versions anymore. We don't talk about, you know, we may talk about release numbers and all that kind of thing, but it's not, you know, version 5.0. So it's a really interesting shift that's happened in IT and cyber and all of the related industries, that some of the stuff that was just logical for us back in the day just has gone now, and it's wonderful. And George, you mentioned a really important thing there, and that's around the scale of data classification and also of traffic classification as well. That's an area that again, you know, when we're working on premise and you've got data centers full of volumes upon volumes of data, classifying that data sometimes became crippling or so overwhelming that it was going to be impossible. The cloud has given us the capability to do that so much more easily, and given us the tool set to do that. Not just classify data in terms of its privacy or its impact on security should that data leak, but also classify data in terms of its value to the business. So, you know, we are just data sponges in the world now. We collect everything, and that's awesome. But many organizations don't go, this is sort of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 stuff. I need to put this in cold storage, you know, 100 miles away. I don't care about it, but I need this stuff running in memory because I need absolutely real time, by the millisecond information. So classification of data has become part of the norm now, not just from a privacy or security perspective, but also from a value perspective to the business. It is currency, and it's becoming more and more important, I think.
And usability, right? I mean, I don't need that compliance data to be as frequently searched. That is, as Pablo mentioned before, a checkbox, right? I'm going to store it for a certain amount of time, but there's things when we're threat hunting and looking into that I need to run that data. I mean, I need to write those queries and I need results right away. Yeah. So the performance of the data and the usability of the data, along with the classification, is key.
Yeah, agreed. So here's an interesting question. I'm actually interested to find out the specific answers to this. we'll start with you, Kyle. How easy was the Cloud Siem tool to learn? And I'll sort of add to that. I think most people that have had to learn a Siem product in the past, it's become a life's work. Would you say that it's similar here, or is it a straightforward process?
I think what's the word under straightforward? Like, I think when I was talking to the professional services people in Sumo Logic, I was like, look, let me do it because I can figure this out. It's fine. Like, I'll just press all the buttons and turn the switches. It's fine. And they're like, oh, okay, sure. I mean, you can start doing that stuff. So, yeah, it's not very hard at all. I think there is a little bit of complexity when you start to get into that like rule generation and that, but like that's every platform has that, right? Yeah. But from the very straightforward learning it, it's very simple. The HUD is I think the most, I guess, feature attractive point of view in the product. It's very good when you get into it. So
I think you're right there. There's a logic to it, which is new for me, and has always been a bit of a paradox about a lot of complex security tools, is there's no logic to them. So yeah, that logic, and as you say, even if you're writing scripts or getting something going, it's Boolean. There's a logical flow to what you're writing. So even then, I think must get through without an instruction manual, which is cool.
Pretty much, yeah.
Pablo?
Very easy, very similar. Honestly, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. One of the guys in our team, he passed this Cloud Siem administration now exam that you guys have, and I think our experience is it's not going to take weeks to learn, weeks to prepare for a test. No, it's very easy, and the UI is awesome. Honestly, it's something that I really like, and I think we haven't touched is that UI that you guys have for Cloud Siem. It's awesome. Yeah.
I totally agree, and look, at anybody that's dialed in and listening to this, check out the UI if you haven't seen it. It is something else. It is just possibly the coolest UI I've seen in my life. Just to have a look at that. Do yourself a favor and give us a call and have a look at the UI on our Cloud Siem product. It's fantastic. And George, it would have been very, very interesting to you to see that start to roll out within our organization, given some of the tool sets that we had to work with prior to that.
Yeah, and so let me kind of look at it from a different angle. We were going through an M&A process, and we were looking for something that was like us, cloud native, easy to use, and a great end user experience. And when I saw that HUD, that Halo type, visual, with the insights to the signals, and it was written from a SOC analyst point of view, which is so important because everything else is like, am I going to satisfy executives, or am I going to satisfy people who are deep query writers? And this was completely different than anything that we saw. And it was competitive, to be able to bring that in house and get it off the market and make it part of the family. And so we were excited before it even happened, as we were going through the M&A process, because we knew it was a major differentiator in the security space moving forward.
Yeah, and there's a paradigm difference between what I've experienced in the past and this.
Me too.
Like it's almost like UIs were built to look complex and impressive, and that's how people bought stuff, because look at all the stuff I know. Whereas this is so intuitive. It's frightening how many years we wasted looking at really complex.
Yeah. Look, I worked for a few SOCs on the past, different SOCs and different parts of the world. And I remember when we had a visitor, for example, we want to showcase our best boards and stuff. And I can tell you, this UI from Sumo Siem, it's something that you leave it all the time on, because it's very easy to digest, very easy to look at, and it's not with the intention of sort of impressing anyone. It's just very useful and very cool. So I would put it just on my on one of our walls that we have. We are not in the office right now, but should be always on on our our dashboard. Yeah.
Actually, that sort of brings me to, I think we've got time for one more question that's come in, and it relates to exactly what you're saying there, Pablo. So we'll go back to you. But how is this, past year and a half with work from home and lockdowns, especially happening across Australia, how has that affected your security ops? Has it impacted it, or is it sort of business as usual, just from a different seat?
From our perspective, it's just business as usual, just from a different kind of room. Yeah, no, I think hasn't been a big drama for us so far. We had to adjust a few processes at the beginning, but not dramatically. So it was just making some fine tuning, but not a big deal, to be honest.
And Kyle, you guys were remote for the best part anyway. So has this current situation had any impact on the way you guys work?
No, not really, to be honest. It's just been business as usual, and we're always in remote, so it was sort of like just make sure everything works remote, and you can do something from wherever you're working, really. Yeah. So no, it's pretty straightforward for us.
Yeah, it's ironic that for all of the lockdown aspect of it, it's quite freeing to know that we can really be anywhere and do the job like we used to, sitting in the office. And George, running a global organization like you do, I imagine that's even more prominent. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. No, it really is. I mean, for us, it was business as usual. One of the things that stood out to me was I couldn't imagine being a company where you were on premise trying to collect data through a VPN. So having all these remote workers go through a VPN to access like Exchange on premise or whatever else they're using. Like, I was just so thankful that we had cloud services across not only our AWS environment, our customer environment, but our corporate network as well too, because it was pretty much business as usual. I think changing of a few processes, that's fair. We had to look at things a little bit different. But for the most part, business as usual, man. Let's scale up, scale out, and collect everything through port 443 and roll, man.
Yeah, and frankly, I think it's accelerated. Past year and a half, as horrible as it's been, from a society perspective and a damage perspective. One of the things that has become quite clear is that we're going to work very, very differently in the future. And if we try and hang on to or embrace the past too much, then it's going to be very, very crippling. So it's an opportunity for us to look at freeing the infrastructure as much as possible. And certainly the move to cloud, to everybody that I've spoken to within the industry, has probably accelerated. In some cases, it's tenfold now. So interesting times. And we've come up to the time. In fact, we've gone a little bit over. So we're going to have to wrap it up. And I think we could all probably have a chat for about another 10 hours. So I really do appreciate everybody's time. I appreciate everybody that's dialed in to watch this. Kyle, thank you. Look forward to catching up very soon, mate, as soon as they open up the borders between Queensland and New South Wales, and Pablo likewise. George, I know it's starting to get into the evening for you, and again, appreciate the time. Thank you all for what has been a really interesting conversation, really insightful, and it's given us a good view on not just how Sumo's Cloud Siem product works, but also some of the challenges and opportunities that you guys have faced over the years. So with that, we'll wrap it up. Thank you again to everybody that's joined us, and thank you to our panelists. Look forward to catching up, hopefully in person very soon. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Talk soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys.